Welcome to the FanDuel Hurry Up. I am Frank Stanfield, and who doesn't like money? I know I do, and that's why I'm joined by Jim Sonis to help preview the Week 6 DFS slate. Jim, what's going on, man?
I am all good, Frank. It's a pretty fun slate cooking up here. We got a couple of potential shootouts, some bad teams we can target, which I always adore personally. So I am pretty pumped for it. It looks like probably my favorite slate so far this year. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Jim, and there's actually a stack on this list that I can't wait to get to, but we will do that later on in the show. Let's start off with one of the more obvious ones, perhaps the most fun, most anticipated game of the season, the Houston Texans going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. And Jim, you like stacking Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Although Mahomes is dealing with this ankle injury, Travis Kelce still getting the targets, hasn't necessarily gotten the end zone. Why do you like these two going up against the Houston Texans?
Yeah, my hope for this team is that they get Tyreek Hill back this week because it's not just Mahomes dealing with an injury. They've got their left tackle, Eric Fisher. He's been out. Sammy Watkins is banged up. They've got a lot of injuries on this team now, and we saw the effects of that on Sunday night. So my hope is that they start to get some of those injured guys back. If they do, that would upgrade the entire offense, including Travis Kelce. We've seen him be really good this year, despite not finding the end zone all that often. He has at least 7 targets in every game so far this year. He has 16 total targets, at least 16 yards downfield, and he's down to $7,500. And we can get a guy as talented as Travis Kelce for $7,500. It's pretty hard for me to pass that up. So Kelce makes a ton of sense here. He has touchdown regression coming pretty soon. And when he does hit that, he's going to blow up for DFS because the yardage has still been there. As far as Mahomes goes, the injury stinks. It definitely takes away one of his best assets, which is his mobility. But he's been playing through this injury pretty much all year long, and he's still been really good, even if the touchdowns have not necessarily been there all the time. So yeah, it's a lot of money to pay for Patrick Mahomes, but his ceiling in every game is 40 FanDuel points. And if you get that, like Deshaun Watson got last week, it's going to erase a lot of ills you may have elsewhere in your lineup. So I want to go back to Mahomes. I want to go back to Kelce. Now, the team people may be slightly down on this team. I know that they're going to stack this game, so you're not going to get these guys at sneaky ownership, but I still think it should be lower than it should be. And that's enticing to me. So Mahomes and Kelce, a really good pairing. I want to keep an eye on Tyreek Hill because if he goes or if he can't go, I think it would be a downgrade for this entire team. But the injury luck should start to revert here for the Chiefs pretty soon. And once it does, guys like Mahomes and Kelce are bound to go off.
Yeah, Mahomes only has one passing touchdown over his last 2 games dealing with this ankle injury, but this is the highest total on the slate right now. The Chiefs going up against the Houston Texans. Travis Kelce as well, only 1 touchdown, but the targets are there. Look to stack both Mahomes and Kelce heading into Week 6. On the other side of that game, we have the Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson coming off a massive performance, over 400 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. But Jim, you like stacking Deshaun Watson with DeAndre Hopkins, not Will Fuller. We saw Will Fuller pop off last week. Why is that?
Well, I still like Will Fuller too, and I'm going to have a lot of Will Fuller this week as well. But DeAndre Hopkins, I think we're going to be turned off by the box scores, and the numbers he has put up recently are not that good. But the usage has still been there, and when you're getting usage against a not great Kansas City defense and tied to a guy who can go off like Deshaun Watson, that's pretty valuable. So far this year, DeAndre Hopkins has 29% of the Houston Texans' total targets. He has 29% of their deep targets as well. So not as many deep targets as he got last year, but that makes sense with Will Fuller being back. So we should downgrade him a bit. But he's still DeAndre Hopkins. As he showed back in week 1, he is still capable of really big games, and I want access to those big games. We saw Kenny Golladay go off with 9 targets and 2 touchdowns against his Kansas City defense, and he's another bigger body guy. He is bigger than DeAndre Hopkins, but I still think that's kind of the archetype of receiver we want to target against this Chiefs defense. Bigger receivers who have an advantage over those cornerbacks in Kansas City, and DeAndre Hopkins is that guy. So Hopkins, I think, makes a lot of sense for a bounce back this week. As far as Deshaun Watson goes, I do prefer him when he is on turf, which he is not on turf this weekend, but he's $8,400. He has great rushing upside, and I like that. And he was able to do well on the road against the Chargers earlier this year. That game was also on grass. So he's not my favorite quarterback play on this slate, but he still has the quarterback 1 within his range of outcomes, and I want to get access to that. So I'm going to have some Will Fuller too, but I think that DeAndre Hopkins eventually is going to hit. I'm going to keep on using him until it does happen. He's not going to be sneaky this week by any means, but he doesn't have to be to pop off. So DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson, I think, my favorite stack on the Texans side of this game.
The targets and the air yards are still there for DeAndre Hopkins. It's just a matter of time before he pops off and has one of those monster games, and it could be this week going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's move over to the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan and Julio Jones going against the Arizona Cardinals. Matt Ryan has thrown for 300 yards in every game so far this season, while Julio Jones has really taken a back seat the past couple of weeks. Jim, why do you like stacking the Atlanta Falcons here against the Arizona Cardinals?
Yeah, we talked coming into the year about how the Cardinals' high pace would increase the play volume for the opposing teams. We've really seen that happen so far this year. Pretty much every team they have faced, outside of maybe you could say the Bengals didn't, but most teams have gone off when facing this team. And this Falcons defense is atrocious, which means the Falcons are going to have to throw, which is great for Matt Ryan. As you mentioned, he's had all those 300-yard games. He is still just $8,100, and I think he's probably one of the best quarterback plays on this slate. I think that there are some other guys in that range, but Matt Ryan could easily be that number one guy. And Julio, yeah, like you said, coming off a couple of down weeks. But the 2 games before that, he had 100 yards and a touchdown in both those games. He had 4 touchdowns over the first 3 games this year, and we've kind of forgotten about that because he hasn't done much the past 2 weeks. But this Cardinals team still does not have Patrick Peterson. They are still down to some pretty poor cornerback play, and that could allow Julio Jones to blow up here. I would assume that when people go at Matt Ryan, they're probably going to want to go with Austin Hooper, given how bad the Cardinals have been against tight ends this year. And I think Austin Hooper makes a ton of sense. It's a cash game play. Sure, I will absolutely go there. But Julio Jones is still Julio freaking Jones, and I want to go at him in this spot. So I think you can go to Austin Hooper and Calvin Ridley, but their roles are a bit more volatile than Julio Jones. And Julio Jones, despite what he had last week and the week before that, does have a very good floor. The ceiling for him is better than probably anybody else in football. So I think I want Matt Ryan here for sure. And I think that Julio Jones is a top stacking partner to pair with him.
Still no Patrick Peterson for this Arizona Cardinals defense, which means Julio Jones is in a really good spot. The Falcons defense has not played well either, which means they could end up in a shootout. We like Matt Ryan and Julio Jones this week against the Arizona Cardinals. Jim, I heard JJ Zacharyson earlier on in the week buying on Kyler Murray because the touchdown rate is so low. Only 4 passing touchdowns so far this year. But again, going up against that Atlanta Falcons defense that just allowed 400 yards and 5 touchdowns to Deshaun Watson. This is a really tasty matchup for Kyler Murray. And if we like Kyler Murray, we got to like Larry Fitzgerald.
Absolutely. And I love Marcus Mariota. I'm never going to trash my boy Marcus, but Mariota threw 3 touchdowns in the first half on the road against this Falcons defense, which means we can go at this team with pretty much anybody. If the Titans' anemic and conservative offense can go off against them, pretty much anyone can. And this Cardinals offense is very much in that same discussion for sure. Kyler Murray, $7,700. There's going to be a regression from a touchdown rate perspective, as you mentioned, and as JJ has mentioned, but he's also rushing the ball a lot. And I love that for quarterbacks in fantasy. Yeah, he had 10 rush attempts last week. He's had 22 over the past 3 weeks combined, and that's led to good yardage, which gives him a very good floor. And once those passing touchdowns come, the ceiling will be there as well. So Kyler Murray, I think, is a no-brainer at 77. I think that he is the other guy I am considering as my top quarterback this week besides Matt Ryan on the other side of this game. So Murray for sure makes sense. Larry Fitzgerald, $5,600. He had 8 targets last week with Christian Kirk sitting out. But even if Kirk does come back, we've still seen Larry Fitz get 23% of the team's targets so far this year. He has 30% of the targets, at least 16 yards downfield. He has 27% of the red zone targets. And again, with that dud last week, his salary is down to $5,600. So you can pair Murray with Larry Fitzgerald and bring it back with Julio Jones and still not break the bank. And I find that pretty attractive. So this game is really fun from a game stacking perspective. If David Johnson is healthy, I would pair him with Kyler Murray. He'd be my favorite stacking partner, but we don't know as of Wednesday what David Johnson's outlook is. So tentatively watching David Johnson if he can't go. I think Chase Edmonds is a great stacking partner with Kyler Murray as well. But as of what we know right now, regardless of the health of those running backs, we know Larry Fitzgerald will be an involved member of this offense, and I want access to that. So as of right now, Larry Fitz, my favorite stack at $5,600.
Kyler Murray is running around more. This Atlanta Falcons defense is not a good one. It's actually a defense that we want to target players against. So we're stacking Kyler Murray with Larry Fitzgerald, who's leading the team in target share heading into week 6. Let's move over to the Cleveland Browns. Everybody wants to fade Baker Mayfield, Freddie Kitchen, this entire offense right now. Baker Mayfield has not thrown for multiple touchdowns in a single game this season, Jim. It's just been absolutely crazy for the Cleveland Browns. But you are telling people to stack both Baker and Jarvis Landry. Why is that?
Yeah, the Browns looked terrible on Monday night, but we also saw them look terrible back in week 3 against the Rams. And what did they do the week after that? They had that huge game against the Ravens where they put up 40 points. So we know this team is volatile. They have their lows, but they also have their highs. And this 49ers defense actually grades that as being the best pass defense in football right now, according to Number Fire's metrics. So it's not a huge fluke that the Browns would go on the road there and face a team coming off their bye and struggle. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now they're back at home. They're facing Seattle, which is a West Coast team for a 1 o'clock game. And yes, Seattle has extra rest because they played Thursday and the Browns played Monday, which is a weird discrepancy there. But I still think that the Browns are in a good bounce back spot against what is currently the 23rd ranked pass defense so far this year. So much better spot for the Browns. And as far as Jarvis Landry goes, I think his role has just kind of gone under or overlooked so far this year because we've been focusing on Odell Beckham and his struggles. But Landry's had a good role. He's had 25% of the team's targets this year. He has 30% of the deep targets and 23% of the red zone looks. And you're getting that role for just $6,700. Now, Odell Beckham is not that much more expensive. And I think that he is also in a prime spot for a bounce back this week. So I will not talk you out of either side of this game, or this stack, OBJ or Jarvis Landry. But I think that Jarvis at the lower salary with the role he has had does make a lot of sense. So the Browns should be due for a bounce back, better matchup this week. They're back at home. That all bodes well. And they're facing a defensive line that's not quite as ferocious as the one they saw against the 49ers, even with Jadeveon Clowney being in town for the Seahawks. I think it's a good week for a bounce back here for the Browns. I don't think they're a lock given the rest discrepancy between them and the Seahawks, but I think it does make a lot of sense to buy into this Browns offense, a volatile one, when they won't be very popular.
The Seahawks don't get a lot of pressure, and we know that's what this Cleveland Browns offensive line has struggled with for a lot of the season, which has ultimately led to the struggles for Baker Mayfield. But Jim likes this as a bounce-back spot for both Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry. Last but not least, we had to save the best for last, Jim, and that's the Miami Dolphins going up against the Washington Redskins. You like Josh Rosen and Preston Williams. Fun fact, Jim, earlier in the week, I gave my waiver wire targets, and Greg Sussman was making fun of me for suggesting Miami Dolphins wide receivers. Why don't you tell him and everyone else why we do like those Dolphins receivers this week?
Because it's going to be a great day, Frank. It's going to be a whole lot of fun here. So, Greg, if you are watching this retroactively, you should take a look at the Dolphins this week against Washington, because Washington's defense is actually atrocious. They rank 28th against the pass based on Number Fire's metrics, and this Dolphins team showed a little bit of friskiness against the Cowboys. They didn't do a whole lot against the Chargers, but now they're coming off a bye, and they are at home facing a bad Washington defense. The Ravens and the Chargers had not been great this year, but I would say this is the best matchup that Rosen has had so far this year, and I think that he's been kind of okay. If you're watching him, the numbers are pretty bad, but he's been kind of okay, and he's $6,400. We want to spend down a quarterback on a slate like this, try to get up to the expensive running backs and wide receivers. Josh Rosen helps us do that. The ceiling may not be great, but hey, we can give it a run here for sure. As far as Preston Williams goes, he's up to 22% of the team's overall targets this year. He has 33% of the deep targets, and he has 8 total deep targets in the 2 games Rosen has started. So even if you don't want to go Josh Rosen, which I totally understand, I think that Williams makes sense as a standalone play. Given the number of looks he has gotten down the field, Josh Rosen's been willing to open things up and chuck it down the field, and that could pay off for Preston Williams, even if it doesn't benefit Josh Rosen. So there's a lot of risk here because this Dolphins team is actually quite bad, but they've had a tough schedule so far. They are at home, they're coming off a bye, and they're facing a really bad defense for Washington. So I think if they're ever going to do anything this year, it might wind up being this week. So you might as well give them a roll and jam in some of those high-priced running backs and high-priced wide receivers. Josh Rosen and Preston Williams help you get there. So even though it carries a lot of risk and it may not work out, I do think it makes some sense in this spot.
On a slate with Patrick Mahomes going up against Deshaun Watson and Matt Ryan going up against Kyler Murray, I'm sure the Miami Dolphins are not going to be very highly owned, but it is a really, really good spot going up against Washington. For Jim Sonis, I am Frank Stanfield. Thank you so much for watching the FanDuel Hurry Up, and good luck heading into Week 6.